Hi and welcome. Today I'm making this little white duck, and I'm using a different method than I've used before to create the duck. It's inspired by a method called Trapunto. There's lots of intense stitching, tone on tone in the background, and it makes for a really clean, simple piece. I think it would look really nice in a children's bedroom. I'll show you how I made it. Let's get started. I'm using white felt and a selection of thin cotton fabrics. I'm using embroidery floss, 2 strands, and GoldenEye embroidery needles, DMC size 8 pearl cotton, and size 24 chenille needles. You'll also need a template of your bird or animal, or you can draw it yourself, and you'll also need some freezer paper. I've pulled out my template set of 6 small birds, and I'm going to choose the duck today. I'll put a link in the description if you want to pick up a set of these. So I'm going to take this duck and I'm going to trace it onto freezer paper. And freezer paper can be ironed onto fabric. So first I'm going to cut out the shape of the duck, and then I will iron it onto the felt. So here it is, ironed onto the felt. And now I'm going to cut out this shape. So I just take my scissors and I follow the lines on the paper and I cut it out. Now that it's cut out, I can just peel it off. Because it's felt, it sticks a little bit more, it pulls at the felt a little bit more than it would on fabric, but that's okay. And now I'm ready to attach my duck to my base felt. So I have a piece of felt that's about 5 by 5 square. I also have a piece of white fabric that's the same size. I'm making sure it fits. And now that I have my duck where I want it, I'm going to baste it in place. Then I'm going to take my piece of white fabric, because it's a white duck, and I'm going to take my pearl cotton and I'm going to stitch around the duck. I'm just holding that fabric in place, and I can feel the edge of the duck shape as I'm stitching. So it's very easy to just sort of trace around it. You can see how it kind of puffs up a bit. If you wanted a puffier appearance, you could use thicker felt or even 2 layers of felt. This is just a very subtle puffy appearance. Now I'm going to choose my fabrics. I've decided to use dyed fabrics. They're very bright colors and they're mostly solid. I'm starting with this piece of green. I could leave this white fabric and put my collage over top of it, but I decide that I'm going to trim off that top piece of white. And I've chosen some of that bright turquoise blue for the water. And I'm going to begin stitching it in place, and I'm going to work around this duck shape. So first I stitch it on straight, and as I start to come around to the edge of where the bird is, I'm just folding the fabric back and stitching it down. I think this is going to create a really nice water effect, and it's going to add some texture. So I've done that all the way up to almost the very top of the bird, and I'm choosing a bright green as sort of a transition color in between the water and the land. And I have a little bit of orange to stitch on for the little duck's beak and a French knot for his eye. And I'm going to continue to add layers and layers of stitching using 2 or 3 colors for the water. And I'm trying to give the effect of the water and the movement. So I'm continuing to stitch. I put a bit of a darker color along the bottom. This is really heavy stitching, and I just keep building it up and building it up. Just using straight stitches, and angling them in different orientations means that it's going to look really organic and it's going to give the effect of nature. So my stitching is almost complete. I just have a couple of areas right on the edges where I want to extend the stitching a bit. You can see the fabric is extending over my felt. So I'm just making sure that I add stitches without getting that fabric to pull in too tightly. I just use my fingers to kind of get it where I want it to be. Then I'm going to take my thread and go back in the other direction. Just look for any spots where I want to add a few more stitches. What I've done here is created sort of a graduation of stitches where the water is very heavily stitched and this light green is heavily stitched but a little less so than the water, and then the top area a little less so again. just to add a little bit of interest for the eye. So when I'm finished adding these extra stitches in this green area, the sewing part of this piece will be complete. So here's my piece. I'm happy with the way it's looking. I like how the edges are raw and it's lining up and it's fairly square, except for this one spot on the top left that's sticking out. You can see when I line it up on my grid, it's just that one little piece. So I could stitch it down, but instead I'm going to take my scissors and snip it off. And that edge is smooth now, and I want it to be frayed like the others. So I'm taking my needle and scratching the edge to fray the fabric. Instead of adding a backing or a border, I think with this piece, I want to attach it to canvas. So I have a 6x6 canvas and I've painted it black. And when I put this stitched piece on it, I think that the black really sets it off. So I'm going to attach it. I'm using a matte gel medium. This one's by Textile Art, and it can be used as a glue to attach paper and fabric. So I take a paintbrush and I smooth some over the area where my stitch piece is going to be. And I make sure that it's pretty much covering all that area. Then I take my stitched piece and I'm going to put the glue just around the edges. I don't want to put it too heavily. I don't want it to soak through. So I'm just almost dry brushing on, just so that there's two surfaces that have the gel medium. And then I take my piece and I center it, place it on. I'm just gently pushing it down. So now I'm going to leave this overnight to dry. I'm going to place a heavy book on top of it while it dries. So this is sat overnight under a heavy book. It's completely dry, and I'm really happy with the way it looks. I didn't do any stitching on the duck at all because I liked the puffiness that I got from doing this Trapunto effect. And it's a really nice contrast to the heavy stitching in all of the other areas. The simple, bold colors of this really makes me think of a baby or a toddler's bedroom, and I think this would be so cute hanging up on the wall. This was a really fun project, and I really enjoyed this different way of adding a bird shape. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, happy stitching.